Hi, Roger. So, what follows is a brief, instructive session about how to adjudicate debate rounds. It's an abbreviated version of a seminar I gave at the beginning of our season here at McGill. And in the context of the Leaders Academy, I would envision this seminar serving two ends. First of all, I think it's important that middle school and high school debaters, especially, are explicitly told what judges are looking for, because I think there's occasionally a disconnect there. And if debaters know exactly what judges want to see, then I think they can tailor their arguments, their tactics, their structure accordingly. And then, secondly, and perhaps this happens already, but I think it would be very helpful to develop debate skills to have students at the Leaders Academy judge their peers. And in order to do that, they, of course, need to know how to judge properly. From my own experience and from speaking with other people in the university debating community in North America, I think judging in almost all cases improves your debating skills because you get to look at debate rounds from a more comprehensive perspective rather than just focusing on your own team's position within a debate round, which is a much more biased lens. So the seminar covers three main topics. First, the criteria by which a judge should be judging debate. Second, how to take notes during a debate when you're a judge. And then finally, some potential issues that arise. And of course, these rules or guidelines that I'm about to stipulate somewhat differ based on style, but I think they're fairly universal. So first, how does a judge decide who wins a debate round? I think there are three criteria that are most important and conveniently refer to them as the three M's: matter, method, and manner. So the first and most important criterion is matter, and that deals with the content of the debate speeches that are made and the actual issues, like the political, social, or economic issues that are being discussed in the debate. So within matter, there are two things that the judge must assess. First, are the arguments being presented logically coherent? Is the debater using logical links to prove the conclusion from the premises that they established at the beginning of their speech? So, for instance, the classic thing that you teach debaters is to constantly ask yourself why in the midst of your argument. So if a debater in a debate about drug legalization is trying to perhaps establish that drug legalization will lead to lower use or lower abuse of harmful drugs, which is perhaps a counterintuitive claim, they need to use logical reasoning to explain why drug abuse will decline as a result of this policy, and they need to be very clear and rely primarily on logical reasoning rather than just citing random examples from jurisdictions that may have applied this policy. And then secondly, within matter, the judge must assess the relevance of the arguments being presented. Why do I care as a judge about this argument? Why is the impact of this argument relevant to the spirit of this round? To pick an illustrative example that's a bit far-fetched, in a debate about, say, applying harsher penalties for certain crimes, the government team might say that building more prisons to facilitate the higher rate of incarceration will create jobs in the communities where these prisons are being built. In a debate about criminal justice, this argument is perhaps not that relevant because the main issues concern the functioning of the criminal justice system rather than on the economy. So even if that argument is presented, in a logical way, and it's the judge can say with certainty that I believe these jobs will be created, they have to consider whether or not that impact is relevant to the round, and they should probably prioritize other arguments over that one. So that covers the first main criterion, matter. The second is method. So this concerns the structure of the debate speech, whether or not the debater is prioritizing their strongest arguments and road mapping their speech, as well as their responsiveness and engagement with the other team. So to return to this whole notion of relevance, it is the responsibility of the debaters, with the exception of the first speaker in the round, to weigh their arguments against arguments presented across the bench. If this is not done, then that is a weakness to their side. If a team only presents positive material and is logically consistent, but does not respond whatsoever to the arguments on the other side, then it's not really a debate at all. It's just a series of speeches. So this is an important criterion that judges must use as well. And then the final criterion is manner. And yeah, in most styles of debate, manner is probably considered the least important, but it nonetheless does affect the persuasiveness of the speech, and so it should be taken into account. The main characteristics of, or the main things that judges should look for here are the body language of the speaker, whether they're making eye contact and using hand gestures appropriately, whether they have good posture, whether they seem engaging at the front of the room. Then also the clarity of their speech, whether or not they're speaking too slow or too fast, and their word choice. They got to ensure that that's appropriate to the round. So those are the three main criteria that a judge should use to assess who wins or loses the debate. The most important is matter, but the method and manner are also very important. Now, the second major thing I'd like to discuss in this session has to do with note taking, and I think especially for younger students, this is a very important skill to develop. Everyone has their own style, but the style that I think is easiest to pick up right away is what's, I guess, roughly referred to as a flow. So I would, either on the chalkboard or on a piece of paper, I would show how I take notes, which is something like this, where you have the first government speaker, first opposition speaker, second government speaker, and so on, and you write their arguments down the sheet like this, and then you draw arrows across these speeches so you get a sense of what issues are being debated across the bench. I would also recommend to students that they not only write what the speaker is saying or write summaries of what the speaker is saying, but that they use a different colored pen to make little comments in the margins about whether or not they thought this argument was strong or weak, because in the post-round adjudication period, when you're looking at your notes and you have only the arguments written, you might not immediately recall whether you found that persuasive at the time. So making comments in a different colored pen is a good way to keep track of your thought process throughout the round. And then the final thing I'd caution under note-taking, and this is a pretty common tendency, especially for new judges, is to not fill in gaps in arguments in the debater's speech. The judge must assess the round that they saw, not ideal versions of arguments that were sort of not perfectly presented in the debate round. So you need to write down what was said and not fill in the gaps on behalf of the debater. So this is a nice tie into the third major question of this seminar, and that is potential issues that arise in judging debate rounds. So first of all, as a judge, you are supposed to be a reasonably informed person and an average debater. And that means you do not have specialized knowledge about the topics that are being debated. So what this means is that you can only dismiss false factual claims if they are very obviously false, or if the other team convincingly shows that this factual claim was false. Secondly, you may use average logical reasoning ability to assess the quality of an argument, but you cannot enter the debate and either fill in the gaps or invent refutation to certain arguments. You can compare the quality of different arguments based on their logical coherence, but you have to do so from the perspective of being reasonably logical. Third, in most styles of debate, there is no such thing as an automatic loss. And I think especially for inexperienced judges, they have this checklist in their mind where it's like, does the speaker have a 1 minute and 30-second model? Do they take a point of information? Do they devote exactly half their time to refutation? And if all those boxes are not checked, then an inexperienced judge, especially maybe at the middle school level, will say that this team automatically lost on this technical mistake. And I think that really takes away from sort of the spirit of debating if these little technicalities are deciding who wins and loses. So role fulfillment and other related issues should factor into the adjudication, but rarely will a technical mistake lead to an automatic loss. And in fact, it almost never will. And I would certainly press younger judges on this issue, especially so that they don't get lazy when they're judging and just kind of look for these mistakes and then ignore the rest of the round. Um, and then finally, a very, at least from my experience with middle school and high school debate, speakers love to assign burdens to the other team and claim that opposition needed to prove this point if they were to win the debate. It's ultimately at the judge's discretion to decide whether or not that burden exists. It's not at the discretion of the teams. And so younger judges should not accept these burden assignments as being legitimate. They need to consider whether or not they are. So that summarizes, or that wraps up the session. I think it'd be very useful to give towards the beginning of the terms at Leaders Academy and really get people going on judging, because I think when you learn to approach debate rounds from an impartial perspective rather than just the perspective of your team and trying to win, I think you definitely learn a lot of skills that are helpful in your own debating career. So anyways, all the best, and we'll talk to you soon.